Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today is a good day because we're going to be answering all of your questions about annealing. That's right. Whatever you guys have been thinking about, whatever you've been wondering about, we have Desmond here today to answer everything you would ever need to know about annealing. All right, maybe we're going a little bit far there, but we do have the owner and creator of the most comprehensive a kneeling line right now on the market. Desmond from Burstfire. Desmond, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Always good speaking with you, Mac.
I appreciate you being on. Obviously, we've done quite a bit of work together. Additionally, you are a sponsor of the website, so I've been trying to get you on the podcast for I don't know, maybe a better part of a year now, something
Yeah,
like that.
sounds about right.
Yeah. So it's been hard to get you on, but I'm really excited. For those of you guys that haven't been following along, Burstfire's been doing a lot of really, really innovative things in the market, bringing the two-in-one system to the market. We have the new induction niller, and you just made the announcement not too long ago about your, I always call it the mini, but I think it's the Edge comp, right?
Yeah, Comp Edge Pro, because customers are asking for, a unit with that, that's compact, and a lot of the offerings out there, there are some compact options. So we're just trying to give customer different options without the prep center because you may already have one. And no, none of us have enough bench space. It looks like you're pretty full yourself back there. Um, so and that's that personally that's an issue as well. So having a compact size, doing what just what we need, and that's kind of what we thought of when we came up with the two-in-one as well. Is hey, it's two-in-one, so now you can get rid of some stuff and and consolidate your bench and obviously provide a great value and all that stuff. So yeah, Comp Edge Pro, that's really kind of reduces the price, same functionality, and yeah, just giving customers what they want.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I definitely want to go through sort of the progression of Burstfire. We want to go through some of those common core questions about annealing, particularly for those people who are, they're thinking about getting into annealing, they're not really sure. And maybe if you have some time, we could talk about some more of those advanced concepts around annealing. But before we do that, why don't we talk a little bit about who you are, sort of your background in the shooting community, and what possessed you to want to, dive in and start to create these innovative products?
Yeah. So, you know, for me, we've been in the manufacturing business. We have another outdoors brand that's a patented product, very popular on the market. We invented the category. It's called the Muff Pot. It's a snowmobile ATV product. So we've been doing that for 20 plus years. So we already have the manufacturing capacity. And and that really runs itself. We pride ourselves in running a very efficient, operationally efficient business, and we continue to do so by leveraging fulfillment partners and just really running things very effectively and efficiently. But my background is in overtime. Like I would say, I've always had import export, and wholesaling. Basically, I'm in sales, but I have experience across these things. So sourcing and things like that have it's just what I've been doing for many years, right? So then to combine that with our manufacturing background, sales, and all that stuff, that's kind of where we came to be. But with Burstfire, we started 6 years ago. And I was yeah, I'm just like you guys. All right, I'm not a competitor. I don't compete. I tried. It's just not for me. I like to take my time, and it's just it's just too stressful, right? I just take my time, but I'm obsessed with details. I'm OCD as how I want to shoot small groups, and if I know I can do better, I want to get the most out of everything. I don't care if I have to shoot 200 shots, whatever it is. But even then, last time we shot Maggie, it destroyed me anyways. I want to
Okay,
rematch
that's
very
all.
soon.
Yeah.
And by the way, for the audience, we were trying to see who can shoot the smallest hole on 200 yards, and Mac prop, it was amazing. You shot, I think that looks like a quarter inch, like literally a quarter inch hole at 200 yards. minutes,
Mhm.
right? And you weren't even trying. I demand a rematch, but
Mhm.
so that's kind of for me, I just demand the best out of things I do, and that's kind of what led me to all different types of equipment. Like
Mhm.
you, like me, we start buying everything, and as we go through our process, we go, hey, I'm doing all of my sizing correctly. I'm using the right equipment, and I'm measuring them to make sure that I am achieving what I set out to achieve. And as we continue to do so, and we find little things that are off, and then we try to fine tune those things. And annealing is one of them, right? So for a lot of people, I think out there is, I think, they may be, if you think one thing is going to solve all your problem, it's not, right? And until you start doing every little thing and thinking things through, and it does take some experience and talk to some people, but unless you're doing something, you can't blame your performance on one thing or another. It's, you really got to take it step by step. And we won't go through those down that rabbit hole today. um, so and kneeling, is one of those things that came through midway, and just like everything else, everything in this market is charged at a premium price,
Mhm.
and and number one is like, you start to look at some things, you're like, man, this thing is expensive,
Mhm.
but but this thing is so nice, it's worth it. Or maybe to some people, to me at least. But there are other things you look at, you're like, wow, why is this thing this price, but I don't have any choice? Or and there are products like that, and where you're like, it's nice, but I can't afford it,
Mhm.
right? And that there's a lot of these kind of product out there. So when I looked at it, the first one, and I bought a few annealing machines, by the way, and I won't name them, and they work fine, right? They're all great, but at the same time, is for the price, as a consumer, I was like, us consumers deserves more, right?
Mhm.
And I look at it knowing, we're already fabricate metal, and in the manufacturing, and look at all the parts. I was like, I can do better,
Mhm.
right? So I set out to go and to say, hey, I'm gonna, the market deserves better, and half of these product I keep hearing I can't afford it. It's nice, I can't afford it. And a kneeling machine has generally been pretty expensive, and you don't get much from it, or it's very expensive. So that's really it. I want to give people their money's worth. I want to give them the best products, the most well manufactured product, the best finished product, looks good, works well, manufactured to the highest quality and standards, using premium parts, because and just because we can. And
Mhm.
number three is being an honest, kind of business, and charging a honest and fair margin, right? Not 1,000%, just because the shooting industry is willing to accept it. So that's kind of what we are, and that's our DNA. And
Mhm.
you'll see that everything we do, we won't sacrifice quality. That's the number one thing, and but we're still going to bring it to everyone at where they say, hey, this is worth my money, right? This is what my money should have got me.
And so let's be very clear about your ability to shoot. You're a good shooter, and if you were to look at the rifles that he has, you would certainly think, okay, these are competition rifles. I know that you did some competing. You like to do shooting. I think more so, sort of to your point, you're a practitioner, and you like to sort of see where can we push the boundaries on these sort of products, where can we push the boundaries with our rifles, and you sort of made this decision because you had this capability, you were in the right place at the right time, that you were going to make this product. What year was that when you decided that you were going to jump into the annealing game? And I think most importantly, why did you decide to do a two-in-one system, right? The only two-in-one system that's out there, because really this was the thing that sort of blew my mind, is your price point for your and granted this isn't your gen 1 2-in-1 annealer, right? You have some stuff before that, so I'm sure there was some growing pains there. But when you and I started getting into it, you had a two-in-one system that I couldn't believe how nice it was, right? And The reason being is because the price point was the same as a normal flame annealer for any other company. So I thought, oh, it has a two-in-one system. It has to be worse quality, and it wasn't. So that blew my even all the way to the box. And if you guys haven't watched my review on that first two and nail, like I couldn't believe how nice the box was. I just came across one different style box at Bass Pro Shop, and as far as I know, you're the only annealer that's was even presented at Bass Pro Shop, which was sort of a feat in itself. But you create something that's really nice, really sturdy. You go above and beyond in the design, but you didn't have to create a two-in-one annealer. So when did you start, and why did you go that direction?
That was, we set out to build a two-in-one from the very beginning, and that was in 2019, right? So, and it's another one of those things that, it's you look at the industry and you go, a lot of these things could be consolidated. Maybe it's just me, but I've always seen it, and I always thought Case Prep Center by itself is bulky. It's a simple product. It's just a very simple product. Why does it need to be, why does it cost what they cost, and why does it need to be as bulky as they are? And sure, right, because that, you make it that way so you can charge more. But then again, I hate seeing people still, doing it by hand. And at one point I was doing a lot of, classes, training, and things like that. So I very much enjoy doing classes and training. But at one point I was doing 5,000 through 3 rounds a month.
Mhm.
And so Keys Prep Center came in really handy, and progressive presses and all that stuff, and and out in and by the way, I started doing it by hand and then use up hand drill, and I know how much of a pain that is, and I believe everybody should own a case prep center, right?
Mhm.
So I want to make things affordable and accessible to everybody, and so that so then now number two is when we look at, and the reason we set out, I was like, okay, I build an annealing machine and the housing needs to be a certain size so we can accommodate, since this is the automated machine, we want to make sure it can fit a certain amount of brass, but there's a lot of empty space. So I
Mhm.
was like, so I knew right from the beginning, just there we can easily fit a 4 station case prep center on there. So that thought came very early, and that's what we set out to build. And so that we never set out to build just an annealing machine. It was always a two-in-one. And the reason we can make it so affordable is because now the only investment for us is in the internal components, the motor for the case prep center, and not now we don't need you don't need a housing, you don't need anything else, right? It's built into an existing platform, right? Existing housing from the annealer, so that cuts the cost significantly, right? I mean, how much you can just go check and go buy some the parts, go open one up, or just think about it. It's just gears and motors at the end of the day, right? That's not very expensive at all. And that's what we can afford to give it to the customer essentially for free, right?
Mhm.
Because it really doesn't cost us much. And again, if someone says you can easily charge an extra $100 more and you'll still be cheaper than anybody else, but that's not what we're trying to do. Again, I want to make sure, I want everybody to have a case prep center. I don't want to see anybody twisting those cases by hand.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Well, it's interesting because you do sell a hand tool, right? And so I've had an opportunity to look through it and use it. And then obviously there's like the drill add-ons, and then there's sort of your system. And as you go up in using these systems, they get progressively easier. And then it makes your life a lot easier. It makes the process a lot faster, right? And sort of from your process to like some of the other ones that might be maybe a little what you would consider more advanced, right? Maybe something like the Henderson, that's a 3-in-1, and or even going to something way more advanced like an auto dot system, right? Then it gets progressively more difficult in the knowledge base you have to have. So you're sort of in that perfect little area where it's like you can do all of your case prep on top, and you can do your annealing, and it is, and like you said, at a price point where people can actually afford it and consider starting to nil. And that's what I've been seeing a lot of. And I do want to talk about that. But so, what year was it that you sort of decided to make that initial jump into making this machine?
It was 2019, and I
Okay.
believe, and I know it hasn't, it's not that long ago, but um, I believe we released the first machine in 2021. So it took us almost a couple of years, and
Okay.
obviously there's the COVID shutdown and all that stuff that
Yes.
obviously played a role in delaying the whole process. But yeah, I think we begin the process, R&D process in 2019.
Mm. And we often talk about, and this is obviously like the sexiest part about your machine is it's two in one, right? And I can't help myself to even just be like, start the conversation there. But then we often forget about the gravity feed chute that you have, which is like, again, a thing that most annealers don't have as well, right? And what
Well,
made you decide you were gonna include that? I know there's some,
yeah.
right? But I would say there's almost an equal amount that do not have the ability to sort of do that, right?
Yeah, the concept of annealing, has been around. I mean, if we look back into a lot of the DIY options and image and pictures of them, it's the shoot based, the gravity based, that's been around. Somebody thought of that of it, and then obviously then the spin, the pan, the baking pan, right? People used to cut out a baking pan and then the spinning option. We see that as well. And then obviously, Bench Source came out with the rotating one, later on. But yeah, so not, we didn't invent them. People think these things have been around for. I mean, I would say I see images dating back as far back as 30 years ago. People would have put out these machines, right? And and I think all of us commercial builders now for these machines, we just took what's been out there. And obviously, I think the only one that's truly unique is the bench source, the rotating disc. That's something that wasn't around. So there's different ones, and obviously, single. The whole point for us is I don't want people to single feed. Yes, they're more reliable because you won't, supposedly, right? But then that's what we set out and say, hey, it's some people may think it's more reliable, but you have to single feed it because there's nothing to get, not no cases will get stuck or whatever it is. But then at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's gravity, right? If we get the angles correctly, we get the measurements down to literally like there are some areas where there's 1 millimeter of difference and things will hang up. And then so now for us is we have to make sure that our manufacturing tolerance, or hey, we can't control like, less than 1 millimeter of a tolerance, because if this part and this part and that, there's 3, 4 different things that needs to play together, and if they're all off by a quarter of a millimeter, which is not a lot, then something goes wrong. So then we have to find other ways to solve the problem. So that's why it took us a couple of years. So we really pay a lot of attention to detail to these small things, trying to build the best machine that we can, and to the highest manufacturing tolerance, to make every machine consistent. So everybody, and I think there's a lot of great machines out there. Don't get me wrong, and I never say one's better. If people ask me, "Hey, why are you different? Well, how are you better?" And I just tell them they're all great. They are, and they all work. But at the end of the day, right? Like, you pick what works best for you. Based on your
Mhm.
how much bench space do I have? I like this process better. I like to be involved. Some people think it's therapeutic. Right? We both heard that before. But after 5,000 rounds a month, no, I'm sorry, that's not. It's not therapeutic to me. And after reloading for now close to 15 years, no, I want to go out there and shoot. Right.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so for us is it's really comes down to your what you like, what makes sense for you. But for ours, obviously we're shoe based. It works. We're back it by lifetime warranty, and I would say that we have the highest manufacturing quality that you have out there. And a lot of people just look at features when you buy products, but then don't look at just the features. Feature is one thing, right? But at the end of the day, how great a product is how well it's built, right? From the wiring, look at the way it's soldered, look at the way from the panels, how they're drilled, are they countersink, are the edges chamfered, and all those small details will tell you the truth, right? You
Mhm.
just go and feel your machine, look into it, and be like, and you may not be able to see it, but from a manufacturing standpoint, we do, right? And a lot of those, it's not that they're cutting corners. Sometimes they just don't have the experience, right, to understand the difference or to pay attention there. And and that's okay, right? But for us, if you look at our machine, you'll notice that in the smallest details, down to the screws and the wires and the holes, the edges, and we're very proud of that, obviously.
One of the conversations you and I have had in the past was about the motors, right?
Mhm.
And how I thought this was an interesting take that maybe a lot of people don't really think about, right? Is you put a cheaper motor in, and one, it's to a disadvantage of the consumer, and two, it's a disadvantage to you, who then has to field all the phone calls of people trying to figure out what's going on with their machine, right? And so you, from the very beginning, realizing that, put what I think are the best like motors that you could have in there that would make sense for the process that we're doing. That are typically a little bit larger, perform a little bit better than what you would maybe see on other annealing or case prep machines. Can you tell us a little bit about that, like the thought behind that, the mindset? Because, like you said, like it's a thing that you don't think about, and you just assume every company is using the same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's and again, the difference in cost is 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 minimal, right? It really doesn't make a difference. And it's not like any of the you know case you know case prep center or annealing manufacturers are making a million of them at this time, right? For it to make a difference. Even then, you still want, it's still affordable enough that you can afford to give customer the better product. I mean, I won't say we use the best, but so let's take look at some of the example, right? Like even for some of the large brand, whether it's green or gray or whatever it is, when you um, when the motor is running, and if you can stop that motor with two fingers or even one finger on the wheel, then there's not that much resistance. And there's always the risk of those motors burning out. I have burned some out myself just by, and then they even in the owner's manual, they tell you not to put too much downward pressure. But that's the thing, right? Like when we're annealing, when we're grinding that, cleaning that primer pocket, our instinct is to push it down as far as we can. And like I said, I have burned out motors myself just because, and then I didn't notice that they say not to do that. But that's against the nature of the task itself,
Mhm.
right? So then you see, that's for me, I always thought that's a problem, right? And the only difference is them trying to save the cost and use a cheaper motor. And the same thing with the annealing machines. You look at a lot of annealing machine out there, they don't have a lot of torque. You can stop those wheels and get it stuck with just one single finger. Um, and they're just not very powerful. They don't run very fast. Sure. At the same time, some people will be like, oh, but I have had this for 10 years. I've had this case prep center for 20 years. That's true, right? They do that. If you do it right, they do last that long. Why do you need something better if they're gonna most of them? Well, if most of them are gonna last that long, but for me, that's not the point. Because as I purchased those product, I thought there was a flaw that I can't use it however I want, the way it's supposed to be used. Um, and then number two is there's the risk of, there's the risk of burning out because I burned them out So I just made a decision that, hey, the we can absorb the difference in cost, and I'm gonna use a high torque motor, a little bit, better quality. I'm not saying we're using the best quality like a Japanese DC motor, right? Those are probably quadruple the price. There's for our application and use, there's no need for it, but we do use better. Why we have a higher torque. It's not a dare, but you probably can't stop our wheel with with one finger, with the torque that we have, and then you probably can't stop our case preps that are on top, with holding it by two fingers. And again, it's not a dare. Don't try it. But that's the difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, and and so far, and number three is we also motor at the end of the day is like any electronics. It goes out when it wants to go out. It has a lifespan, right? If you get the full use of it, it's supposed to run for years, 10, 20, 30 years, right? A normal use for some of them. So like our motor is rated for 30,000 hours. That's quite a lot, but is it really going to last 30? It may last 40. Who knows? So we also, when we built our machines, and you probably open one, you know, and looked at it back, right? So, it's all self-serviceable. We make it serviceable. You don't have to pull it back. Everything is plug and play. We use wire plugs, and then we have for each station we use top wheel, bottom wheel, the four station or the six station. They're all independently powered motor. So we're not giving you one motor and turn them all using plastic gears, which is what everybody is doing. And the problem with that is those gears run out before your motors does, right? And then and most of the time you have to send it back, or maybe like someone like with the green one, they'll just send you a new one, whatever it is. So I also saw that as a flaw. And again, I just feel like you know the market, the industry, the consumers deserve better for what we charge them, and and we can certainly afford to give them that. So, and we did. So we put one motor, and if one breaks, you don't have to change the whole thing, whatever. You just unscrew the screw, pull the two plugs, put a new one in, and give us a call. We'll send it to you. Like everything we do, you just cover shipping, and we got you covered. That's our warranty. Although I don't know if I should say it here, but I'll say it anyways, right? Just so everyone knows. Warranty at the end of the day is to prevent abuse, right? We'll always cover you under normal circumstances. Although we say 1 year or 3 year or whatever for certain parts, at the end of the day, we have not charged a single customer to date, right? If they bought it on the website themselves, sure. But if they come and ask us, we have not charged a single customer today, as long as there's no sign of abuse. And it's also difficult to kind of abuse these machines to begin with anyway. So yeah, just and so we make it self-serviceable, easy to replace, and we provide replacement parts for pretty much every component in the machine, so your machine can run indefinitely with us.
Mhm. Yeah, and that was sort of the interesting thing, right? There's the gravity chute, the independent motor systems, the size of it, right? I thought it was going to be a lot bigger than it was, and so I was generally surprised to be like, "Oh, this is a reasonable size and for consumption of space, particularly if you're combining the two in one. Now you can remove that other case prep center that was there, and then you also had your own tooling made,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
You wanna talk about that a bit?
Yeah. Again, our DNA is to make make the best tools, at an affordable price, and we want to make our product better than anybody, and we want to be very competitive, because again, our DNA is we want to make great products affordable to everybody. Right? We don't want to make a premium product accessible to certain people only, and we want to make product that works. So and you mentioned like some of the premium machines like Henderson trimmer or whatever it is. They're great. I don't think we're ever gonna go that route, right? They serve their purpose. There's an area that where we play at that we like to be. So with the tools is when I look at it myself, and you look at all the case prep tools, simple trimmers, cleaners, reamers, uniformers, gauges, whatever it is. They're not, well, number one is some of these products, they're all dimensionally incorrect. And one of the perfect example is when you look at the reamer and our small primer pocket, pocket dimension is, 0.1730 ish to, 0.1750, somewhere around there, right? That's the dimension. So then that's where you want to cut when you put a primer in there. So you would think that your reamer needs to be at least 0.1730 because you need to cut a one at the minimum 0.1730 hole to fit a equally dimensioned primer in there. But if you measure every single reamer out there, the prep tool bits from every major brand, they're all made in China, number one, right? They're all made in China. Could they be made from the same OEM manufacturer? Possibly. I don't know. But I know they're all, Chinese made. And number two is they're all measure the small pocket 0.160, right? And then now we can do the math ourselves. Why is that 1.160? Or I think it's 0.163. That's a whole, that's way smaller. And that's the reason why when we look at the cutter, there's a cutter at the tip and then there's a chamfer at the bottom. Not a single one of them will cut with a cutter at the tip. Then what is it for? Right? Why, and then that's why you're grinding the hell out of it a minute or two, something like, sorry, not a minute or two, maybe like 30 seconds. You have to put significant effort to get, to grind one out and your hand gets sore. And we're like, hey, that's because you're always cutting with that chamfer part. The tip, the cutter where you're supposed to cut with is pretty much useless because it's undersized. So then we sit down and say, you know what? These are dull. They don't last too long. They usually you have to get a new one every like, 1,000 cases or so. And then they're not correctly dimensioned. And I was like, and then now people that can't afford the case prep center or the fancier tools or whatever it is, the, Henderson trimmer, what all that stuff, people that just want to do it by hand, now they don't have an effective and efficient tool to use. So then we basically went and redesigned everything and make sure they're correctly dimensioned, that they're cutting at the right angles, right? You're not creating a crater when you're cutting the reamer because that's not how a swage, kind of is formed. So we cut it just right, minimal brass removed, cut at the right angle. And that's why ours, you can, if you try to, you can you can remount a case literally with just quickly press it down, no pressure at all, and it cuts, and you're done, right? Rather than grinding for 30 minutes and go, is it done? So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. We just went, and they're made in the USA, right? And by the way, our products are, our needling machine are assembled in Taiwan because we have a facility there. But we do manufacture a lot of the metal parts ourselves, just like our case prep tools. But yeah, that's what we set out to do with those tools. Is again, right, looking at the market, we didn't like the options out there, and we think we can make it better, and we can better serve the community, and at the same time give provide them better products at a fair price, compared to the market. And so that's how that came to be.
Yeah, and I think we oftentimes just assume at this point in the annealing world or the case prep world that like those things have been worked out and everything is designed the way it perfectly should be designed and everything. The tolerances are really good and all of this stuff, and it's not really, and you don't know if you don't know, right? And so you have some really great videos on YouTube. I know we've sort of talked about it and you're like, oh, I don't know, but I really like them. I think they're just like first person and you're showing some of these processes around the tools. And so if you're the type of person that doesn't really know this stuff, go check out the Burstfire YouTube channel because it does have some of the walkthroughs and the explanations, even if they are a bit old, showing how their tools differ versus other tools and how easily they work. And I can say from the hundreds and hundreds of cases that I've been running and processing with your guys' system, I haven't seen any dulling. I agree with the amount of pressure you need to put on. Like everything seems to work just right, and all of my my reloading has stayed very consistent, and that's sort of the key thing there, right? I mean, you do the tools, use the tools, but in the end, you measure everything. And if you do and it continues to work, then clearly you got something going good for you, right? So I've been very beneficial on that front to be able to try a lot of this stuff out. I've even used the hand tool as well. I don't like to use it, but I have used it. It works just as well, which is really great. And so that was sort of my experience for a while, right? Using your sort of your two-in-one system that you would progress, building, year after year, making small incremental changes that continue to improve the product. We didn't even really touch on the 360 movable system, right, for the actual hose. And I think you even told me once that the limiting factor on flame annealers sort of comes down to the hose and the spout that the flame actually comes down to. And so you'd had made a significant like choice on sourcing things that were relatively consistent as well as had a good threshold for lasting a long time.
Yeah, and we do that with with everything. But again, wherever in everybody, reloaders comes from all different trades, and everybody, have different opinion, and we all have different preferences as well, right? So you can't satisfy anybody, and that's okay. But just for us is we we source things, or we build things based on what we believe is going to be the most reliable, the safest, give you the best reliability, and and at the same time it's going to get the job done, the best way it can. And like you said, the torch and the hose, we use the large brand product, but sadly, and as a consumer, I used it. It sadly had a 15% failure rate year over year, right? And that's pretty significant.
Mhm,
So we're dealing with, hey, my hose is clogged, my hey, this knob doesn't work anymore. We still have customer come to us with the current one we use. And basically we're just working with them. We work with the OEM manufacturer to say, hey, can we want the same product, but we need these issues worked out, right?
mhm,
And that and we were and because they're that torch brand, we won't say who, but they're also manufactured out of Taiwan, right? So we have a facility there, so we're able to do so. um yeah, so it's the same product except improved, if you want to say.
mhm,
And we made the you know because there are smaller cases and large cases, and some because a good example is when you're annealing a 223, when when we're used to our regular pencil torches, that little very fine pencil torch is enough to engulf and circle around that 223 case. But then for someone annealing a 50 BMG, which they do with our machine, they're like, hey, this little thing doesn't quite cover the whole thing.
mhm,
But then you have people that are kneeling to go, hey, this thing's too big. Well, to me personally, there's nothing wrong with too big. It still covers the case, and it'll probably give you more flame annealing it faster. And that's the point. Now, is it more efficient? So, like I said, you can't satisfy anybody, but we put everything together with the best intention, right?
mhm. Yeah, and I've gone through a couple, not gone through because that would imply I've had any issues, but I've tested a bunch of them. I've done a bunch of filming on them. I've just sort of like done stuff that people would never do. I just leave them running, right? Because I'm like working on other stuff, and everything's really gone great. And it's been my pleasure to be able to bring this to people in the community because I you and I share the same mission, right? We want to grow the community and we want to find a way to make it a little bit more affordable for everybody. And with the right tools, and doing annealing, you can save the life of your brass, run the timeout on those, and continue to have fun on them. But you do need to anneal, right? And I think for a long time, annealing is sort of a scary thing for people. And I still, even it's 2025, I still have people asking, like, do you need to anneal? Is that like a thing, right? So it's not like it's commonplace for people to know that you need to anneal your brass to be able to soften in and reharden it through the full reloading process. So you've been able to serve two spots with the annealing and the case prep together. And for me, I've had the opportunity to test other annealers, and like you said, they work just as good, right? There's a preference on workflow and things you'll have to work through depending on what the other flame annealers are. But then I tell people, I say, hey, this one's really good. And if you already have a case prep center, okay, then maybe that's all you need is this annealer, right? Unfortunately, you've now have you've with your new system because it doesn't have a case prep center on. Now I can just say, well, get this one, right? But before it was like, we'll get any other flame vanilla if you don't want the case prep center on there. So that was sort of the narrative for a long time. But if people are like, I don't have either, I'm getting into reloading, I'm gonna say, well, why would you spend 60 to 100% more to get two separate pieces when you can get one that saves space and is manufactured to my point, the top of its what it can be manufactured to, right? So that's been a really interesting conversation for me over the last a year or so. And but then, that only serves a portion of the community I work with, right? And that's the people that were trying to get into the sport, that just getting started. But then you have this other entire group that they need to move away from flame and they need something a little more consistent, or at least for a lot of people, something that's maybe a little easier. And that's where induction annealing comes in, right? And then all of a sudden you tell me, hey, we're working on an induction annealer. And all of a sudden we got one here, right? Now it's been out for a while, but can you sort of tell us about the inception of the induction annealer, the market you're trying to meet? Because obviously, like, this isn't your typical $2,000 induction annealer. That's what you're seeing right on the very high end, and the only people that can really afford it or are willing to pay for it are the high end, competitive shooters, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this induction journey.
Yeah, and it really goes back to the beginning of our conversation, just building a great product that's affordable to everybody, and that's what it is. We just say, hey, like, can we build a similar product? And we don't want to build a kind of just a bare bone product where we're just cutting out the technology, right? Because I think a lot of all the induction annealers out there today, well, I would say most of them, right? There are some, more simple products. But most of them are technology based, and they're great for their own reason, give you a peace of mind. And they'll continue to do what they do. But we want to bring something like, hey, well, what can we bring to the table, right? Number one is I want this to be accessible because everybody's like, oh, that thing is great, but there's no way I'm going to drop $2,000 or close to $2,000 on it. And it's the same thing we hear over and over. So I was like, what can I do to, bring this, bring the joy and the fun of reloading and shooting and get, help everybody maximize their performance, and achieve their goals. So and we we did some math, source some products, really did a lot of homework, and we said, hey, yeah, we can do it. We can do it. I think we can, create a different product that's affordable without sacrificing performance and quality. And bring an equal amount of product, but very different to the market, and that's kind of what we came to be, right? We're the only shoot based. Well, now I think there are some add-ons that you can add to become shoot based, but we're really the only shoot based automated machine, annealing machine. So a lot of our design is somewhat unique as while also taking some inspiration from others as well, right? Other similar designs and machine, but I'm not talking about from other similar vendors, but just machining in general. So like our multi-caliber disc, right? Instead of having to buy pilots or what they call it for each caliber, and they're not cheap, right? We never wanted to be in that business. Again, we all of our machines comes with everything included. So we thought, hey, let's it's simple. It's all it is. It's just different calibers, different sizes that just make a turntable that can fit all of them. And then, we knew that our, aluminum wheel that we have used for our original annealing machine, based on the dimension that we have, come up with, we only need two. We don't need, a lot of people have five or six different configuration. You have to change out this with small, large, medium, magnum, whatever it is. We're like, hey, it's not that hard. All we need is two, and you'll fit all. So we, built on that same concept, and that's kind of how we came up with the machine. And so now we have an automated, annealing machine, an induction annealing machine. No extra, no additional parts needed. It's water cooled because a lot of induction out there, if you look at their description, depending on ambient temperature or whatever it is, it can run for 30 minutes before it overheats. If it overheats, it'll shut down. Ours you can run for hours and hours and hours, right? Because so we use a water cool system. There's four heat fans in there. So that's kind of what we set our mission to be, just like everything else: durable, affordable, and without sacrificing any quality. And so that's what we set out to do. And there we go. Right, that's the one to your left.
And you also increase the amount of tooling on top, right?
Yep, yep. Six station prep center, because a lot of people, some customers have asked for it. And again, right, like some customers always go, hey, like, what, I don't need a prep center. I don't need a prep center. But just know that, again, right, like we're not, the that's really a bonus, right? Like if we were to make one without the prep center, you won't notice much of a cost difference, right?
Mhm.
And they're independently powered, two-step power switch, so one, they don't work at the same time, right? So a lot of people say, I don't want this thing spinning or brass dropping while I'm annealing. No, that nobody does that anyways, right? But a lot of customer ask like, hey, I want a chamfer deburr, I want to clean, I want to ream, but then I also want to brush my neck, and I want to do, I want to flash, uniform my flash hole, but there's only, so I need six. So then, we always kept that in the back of our mind and go, okay, now we have enough space on top of a machine that we can give you six. And I believe there's only one other machine on the market, that case prep alone, standalone case prep center, that has six stations, I believe, and it's like almost $250.
Mhm. Yeah, it's sort of an interesting way to think about it, right? Even in the marketing, you could have put like free case prep with every with every niller, right? Because it's like that is the reality of it. When I talk to people, I say, look, you can buy this a niller that doesn't have a case prep center, or you can buy this one that does, and they're the same exact cost. So why wouldn't you buy the one that does, right? Now some, like you said, some of the arguments were, well, I don't need it or I don't want it. And then you came out with the comp edge, right? Which almost feels like it's in reverse. If you were to like look at it, you'd be like, obviously they made the annealer first and then they added the case prep center on it, right? But you found that there was this need, and you've released it fairly close to the induction release as well, right? And I think you're doing pre-sales right now, right? On the new one.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, they will be back. They will both be back in stock next week.
Mm. There you go. For you guys that are tracking, that'll probably be like a week or 2 weeks after this when this comes out. But that's early November. They should be coming back in. But it's such an interesting thing. It's such an interesting space. And you've done everything you can, and every conversation we have is how do I create the best products on the market for the most amount of people to grow the industry, right? That's really what it's always come back to. And you've done a really amazing job on there, right? What we haven't really talked about is the cost, right? Can you walk us through each of the machines and what the costs are on them?
Yeah. So so our induction annealer, is, again, right. We don't care what the market is, what the market value is, right? Like $2,000, whatever it is, and we set the price, based on our margin, and what we think is fair, and again, make it accessible for everybody. So for the induction annealer, it's 625.
Hmm.
Okay, 625 for the unit, and for if you buy through us, there's shipping, but you can also buy from Bass Pros, Midway, Precision Reloading, a lot of our partners. and and they may offer at a cheaper price, or they may have free shipping. So yeah, so but MSRP is 625, and for the Comp Edge Pro, the base price is 199, right? So now not only were and that I believe might be, it puts us at the lowest cost for any annealing machine on the market. I don't think anybody is below $200,
Mhm.
or even 250, right? I think the lowest price is 250, so that that's significant savings for a lot of our customers. And for our two-in-one flame annealer, MSRP is 290. But again,
Mhm.
all of our products you can find them at other major retailers out there, and also some if you go on our website, we have a where to buy, and just look for local store, online stores, even internationally, you'll likely find one in most countries that sells them.
Yeah, so a lot of your stuff, you don't like a lot of this stuff, you don't see it fairly frequently outside of like their website, right? And then to see it with major distributors across the country, particularly in a brick and mortar like Bass Pro Shop, is quite a weird experience, right? To like, that's what we wish. We wish as high end reloaders that we could go into a shop and see them and fill stuff in rifles and all this stuff, but we just can't. It's not the reality. But yours is one of those few products that you can actually go pick it up right day of, which is pretty cool. So you have all of these products out. They, I think, serve pretty much the majority of the community. What I sort of want to talk about is maybe some of the fallacies in the industry around annealing, and maybe some of the misconceptions that people have, right? Particularly, like maybe let's start around flame annealing, right? Um, I think the general idea is that flame annealing is far inferior than induction annealing. Like, so much so that you can't even really compete on flame annealing. And I've found that to be false, because I've found that some of the top level bench press guys and F class guys and some of the PRS guys are still doing flame annealing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this conversation, this will probably get you a lot of comments on this podcast, and you can ask 20, and the most amazing thing is, it's not amazing, right? It's just when someone asks a simple question about kneeling on any online forum, with Facebook, whatever it is, every single time you'll have 20 different answers. It's like you
Mm,
didn't even ask, and then all of a sudden, and then there's also the one guy that there was always that one guy says, I've been in the shoot, reloading for 40 years and I never kneeled. So there's a lot of different opinion, and there's a lot of different information out there. And I have also witnessed many times two mythologists arguing with each other of what's right, what's wrong, right? And then they're supposedly the experts, and two of them are arguing with each other over this topic. So, you know, personally, an induction and flame. And by the way, we've done a lot of testings. We work with labs, we work with pathologists. We do a lot of these testing. We don't publish the information because I think it's, we don't want to stir it up a hornet's nest, because there's so many different opinions out there, and just anything reloading, you're not going to change it in anybody's mind.
mm,
It's almost like politics to me. Right? Like you're just not going to change their mind. That's just the way it seems. But again, we test the result. We're pretty thorough with it, and I believe we've done a good job, right? Because a lot of times, with these testing, people test the surface hardness. Are they consistent, right? With when after before kneel, after kneel, the surface. But we also cut it open and say, hey, just because the outside is a certain hardness, do we achieve the same on the inside? Right? And at the end, same thing. You measure it and go, is it achieving the results that we need? So we're pretty thorough with it, and we look up under a microscope. We send it to the lab, have them look at it, and tell us what they see, and and helping them understand what we're trying to achieve. So over time, they know what we're trying to do, and we spend a ton of money on it just for our own knowledge, right? We don't want to publish it. A lot of it is for our own knowledge, just to make sure that we're selling something that's beneficial, and
mm,
it is what it says it does, and it certainly does. So now, let's when we talk about flame annealing or annealing anything, we're trying to achieve two things. Where we're trying to you know um, extend the longevity of the brass cases by returning it to to its to make it softer and return it to its kind of virgin brass form. And then number two is maximize the consistency when when you size, when you're bumping your shoulder, your neck tension, and all that stuff. Although a lot of times when we do it, we measure our shoulder, but a lot of people always go, "Oh, I use a mandrel, and yeah, I set it at 2 thou, and I believe it's 2 thou." Well, if you don't, we measure everything. Why aren't you measuring a neck tension? And you'll find a lot of times if you don't properly anneal it, you're not achieving those results. But nonetheless, I think annealing is a very simple concept. You heat the brass to a certain temperature to and once you reach that temperature, the brass would have achieved what you set up, the goal you set up, which is extend brass case life and consistent neck tension, right? So you really don't need for every single one that just say everyone say, hey, I got every single one's got to be exactly at this temperature. If this one's at 800 and this one's at 750, there's inconsistency and it's going to affect my results. That's just not true. It's right. Once you achieve, it's very simple. I want to extend my brass case life. Extending brass case life, um, you know, some annealing is better than no annealing, but nonetheless, as long as you heat it, it's going to get there. Obviously, the more the better within a certain acceptable range. But neck tension, same thing. Once you achieve a certain temperature, um, you know, you would have achieved your goal of making sure that every case is consistent. And so now everything else is really irrelevant. Once you achieve those two things, why do you care, you know, if this one's a 850 and that one's a 950 or whatever it is? You achieve the same goal. And that's that, right? So, and also once you hit, let's just call it the finish line. Once you hit the finish line, diminishing return kicks in really fast. They start to not soften as fast. At first, they soften at a very rapid pace, but once you hit that mark, diminishing return hits really, really hard, right? And then there's a really big gap between that and the melting point. So people that for flame annealing at least, for induction you'll melt those cases rather quickly. But nonetheless, that's with annealing, whether it's flame or induction, that's our goal. We just want to get to that finish line or as close to that finish line, and then you measure it to make sure that hey, it's achieving the consistent shoulder bump and neck tension. And number two, I know I heat it, so it's like and it's like it's going to extend my brass case life. That's really it, right? Now you achieved your goal. You went to the finish line, and that's it. Um, but the difference between flame and induction, for me personally, is just simplicity, right? Because with the flame, you need to set up your tank and torch angle, and set it up and measure the time and all those things. It takes a little bit. Everything is therapeutic or easy when you in the beginning. They're like, oh, I don't mind. But once you start doing so much of it, once it's not, this machine is not new to you anymore, everything starts to go, it's such a chore to bring the machine out and wrap the tank and attach the hose, all that stuff. Induction annealer is, for example, flame annealing, where you have to do all that stuff, and then you heat it for 6, 7, 8 seconds per case, and then they drop. But our induction annealing machine, not only it's one of the most efficient, it's also one of the fastest, right? Because you look at some of the machine out there, it takes 5, 6, 7 seconds for them to anneal the case. So it's not faster than a flame annealing, it's just that people believe is more consistent. Okay. And that's what people have been saying. But ours not only would provide you the simplicity, the value and all that stuff. Ours, if you look at ours, you can anneal a 223 case in literally 2 seconds, right? So at one third of the time. So again, that's another thing that we set out to do is that now our machine can handle the power, the heat, and all that stuff, and do it for a long time. That's crank this thing up and make it the most efficient machine on the market. right? So then that's the benefit. You don't have to set up anything. You really just turn on the machine, stack your brass, and then test one case, or you remember the setting that you had it at last time, and the machine just goes,
Mhm.
right? So that's kind of what our induction annealer offers.
So far as sort of wrapping up the flame annealer thought here, when setting up for the flame annealer, right? I think you've hit a lot of really interesting points, right? In my opinion, it really comes down to patience and a little bit of time of learning the system. Once you learn how to do it, and once you know what a nailed looks like, you can just route you're just doing a system now, right? And when you go up from your, and granted, yes, like you're gonna run out of propane or the butane, and you're gonna have to replace it, and depends on how much you're doing at a time. But I find like most people, they even like for competition, they're nailing like 100 to 300 rounds, right? Something like that. So it really comes down to sort of like the simplicity. But to that point with the flame, Manila, you've sort of told me two interesting things, right? The one is most people, they position the brass and the flame tip in the wrong place. They're looking at the wrong thing, right? On where they put it. And the second is, how do you know if flamed and nil? Because for most induction, you can't see the brass, so you're just assuming their technology is correct and they've tested enough. But for flame, you can see it. So how do you know that that is done?
Yeah. So again, right, all there's a lot of different opinions, and the only we have what we believe, and obviously based on testing. So I won't go into. I don't want to uh, start a whole argument on your common area, but we believe the best method is the glow, the glow method, because once you hit, once your brass starts to glow, for about half a second, 1 second, that's the perfect doneness, right? The where you achieve the extending the your life of your brass case, and also consistency in your neck tension. And if you don't believe me, measure it yourself, right? And one of those things where a lot of people use Tempelac, and you can continue to use them, but for me, it's difficult. I've always find those difficulty to use, because now you're staring at it and wondering where that paint runs off, and when it runs off, is it like, did it run off half a second ago, or I don't know, right?
Mm.
So, but then one of the things that can I used Temperack in the past, but I've always found that when I went to 750, the case didn't glow, right? Case is not glowing at 750, and and when we go and measure. Shoulder seems to always, if you put the flame at the right place, shoulder seems to, be consistent most of the time, but it's the neck tension that I personally always had issues with, and we actually have a video on it on our website. So we tested them at different flames, and then once you measure it, you all out of 5 cases, now they're off plus or minus by 1 thou, 2 thou, or 3 thou. Obviously the quality of the brass matters, some of them even more, but once you achieve a certain again, getting to the finish line, like we said, now you have consistent neck tension. So like like that's, I think that's how you determine it, right? Like, hey, is it 750? Is it Tempelac, or is it a glow in the dark? I think that's the two method that people have always argued over. Oh, once it glows, you're toasting the brass, or 750 is right because that's what people have been saying for decades. Well, test, measure the results, right? Just like everything we do, measure it. And if you say, hey, 750, I'm still getting inconsistency. Well, for based on our testing, that's because you're under annealing, right? Crank it up a little more, and then once you achieve the desired results, that you're like, hey, now I'm getting consistency in my neck tension and my shoulder bump. Great, this is where my setting is going to be at.
So
I
pull
think,
the
yeah,
flame.
I think all that's irrelevant, right? Like, because at the end of the
Mhm,
day, we anneal for a purpose. So
mhm.
if it's not helping you achieve that, achieve those goals, we can argue 750 or for glow in the dark are you want, right? You want consistency is next extension so you can your your finished product can perform better. So make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Measure it, and and make sure that you're getting what you want out of it.
So for the flame, what should they be looking at? Should they be looking at the if you guys aren't super familiar, typically there's a dark blue tip and
Yep.
then there's a lighter tip that goes around that. Where should they be placing that piece of brass in
Well,
relevance on the flame?
yeah, and I think the biggest mistake most people make is, is not what is where to place that is secondary, right? Because the flame spreads out, and it engulfs most of the case, and there's heat migration and all that stuff. So most of the time, it's less of an issue. The biggest problem that I see is that they don't turn up the torch big enough. So when you turn up the torch, sometimes you'll see someone with a 1/4 inch blue flame. And and that thing is small, right? And they're like, hey, like I know typically people say that you need to anneal it for 6 7 seconds, but mine is going for like 14 seconds. Well, geez, like your flame is 1/4 inch long, right? Crank that thing up. Ideally, you want your because the idea of annealing is to flash anneal, right? Heat up a piece of metal at a at rapid pace, and heat without heat migrating to the base of the case. That's really hard to do unless you're 300 blackout, 5.7, or some of the smaller cases. Then you need to worry about heat migration. But nonetheless, no matter how no matter the case, right? The answer is crank up the crank up the heat, right? Flash anneal it. So ideally, you want your inner blue flame. I don't, because the entire flame varies by brand and torch, but you want your inner blue flame, which is the hottest part, to be about 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch long, right? And when you have that, you're like, okay, now my flame is big enough. And usually that's depending on your torch. That's at least halfway open or more. And then you want the tip of your blue flame just touching or not just right outside, not touching the case, because that's the hottest. That's where the flame is the hottest, right? So now you're producing the most heat and hitting at the right point, and at the same time, um, right? If we're measuring, a lot of people will also, it's also where you point the flame. Shorter cases like 2 to 3 doesn't matter, right? The flame will engulf the whole entire area. But some of the longer cases, like 300 Win Mag or whatever it is, um, you really need to be careful where you point it, because we want the shoulder. So a lot of people, I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they'll point the tip of the flame right at the top of the shoulder, right? Top, that where where the line goes to start going down to the base. And and then when you look at that, you're like, hey, you're almost completely ignoring the part of the tip of the neck or part of the neck. And then also your heat is also going below your shoulders where you shouldn't be annealing, right? So, and a lot of people point it there because I don't know where they got the idea, internet. But but you will want to look at, say, hey, I want to point my tip of my blue flame between my shoulder, top of the shoulder, and the neck, right?
Okay.
And then the flame on the side will engulf both of these areas without going below the shoulder where we don't want to go. So that's kind of where you point it. You point it at the middle point between the two things that you want to anneal, right?
And so far, you've sort of said this. You said once it starts glowing, right? And I think this is maybe the language where it's most confusing for people because a lot of times they think like it should be glowing from the very opening at the mouth all the way to right below the shoulder. That is the case glowing, but that's not the case, correct? What are we looking for to where we know, okay, within a second, this case should be dropping.
Yeah. Well, that also depends on the case, right? Because you probably wouldn't want to do that with a 300 blackout or to glow too far down. But generally, you just want the inner lip of your neck, right? So
Mhm.
it's right inside the case mouth. on the on the inside. Once you, because that's usually where it's gonna you see the most glow, because number one, it's it's inside the case, it's a little darker, so that's where you usually see the glow first. For thinner, smaller cases, as soon as it begins glowing, you'll probably find your desired results there, that you achieve your consistency and things like that. But for some larger cases, 308, 300 Win Mag, or and so on, because obviously every piece of brass have, even different lots have different case thickness and dimension, and maybe even brass composition, right? So they may vary, but for some of the thicker cases, you may find that, hey, once it starts glowing, I need to let it glow for 1 additional minute. I'm sorry, not minute, 1 additional second. Yeah, no, not a minute. Sorry about that. So, 1 additional second. And I find that with my 308 Lapua, right? They're thicker. They tend to take an extra second to heat up than other cases. They're great brass cases. And for those ones, I have found that, ones that, and those are probably the only, I use both Peterson and Lapua, mostly Peterson nowadays. But with the Lapua, right, or Petersons, I find that I don't have to anneal as often, right? So brass do matter. It's like, once I size it, it maintains that consistency, and I don't see, there's no issue versus Lake City where I have to anneal every single time. Um, and yes, I am getting a little lazier nowadays. I would use the anneal everything, but then nowadays I just look at it and go, well, if it's consistent, if it's still good, then I'm just gonna run with it because I want to go shoot. Right. I want to go practice and I want to go shoot. So that's my mentality, but it's up to you. But yeah, but but for some cases, you'll find that, hey, I have to go a second longer after it starts glowing for me to achieve that same result. Right. So just like everything, like we keep going saying from earlier, measure it. Right. That we know what the goal that we set it out, measure it. And if you're not getting it, nine out of 10 times you're under annealing.
Mhm.
That's really it. You're under annealing. If you're not achieving the result, you're under annealing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's an interesting misconception about cases, and I think we think of them as like cases, and we forget that they're metal, and we forget that different manufacturers, they use different, like, sort of component, like different mixtures of those metals, different thickness of those metals. And that's why there's sort of become these preferred and not preferred, and people like the style of it. And not only that, I've read through a couple of academic journals on metallurgy, and sort of this idea where people don't really understand that, like, technically every new anneal it's different, right? Even though it's the same case, you should treat every new one differently. And the temperature at which that case needs to be at actually gets a little bit lower, and this is progressive. As it moves forward, right now it might be like every 3 and then 6 and then 9, you would go a little bit lower because the metal's getting less, and you've nailed it so many times. But it's an interesting thing, right? And I think this is where people overcomplicate it. To your point, if it's sizing back, if the tension is there, if you don't have significant spring back on it, then you're probably hitting the right areas, right? And for most people, like, you're not going to outshoot your ability to anneal, even at the flame side. I really do believe that, right? But if you want it to be easier, then you can get the induction version, right? And so the one question I really had for you when you were telling me about the induction version is like, why aren't you going for why? Like, I thought there only was this like 1700, 1800, $2,000 bracket for induction. Now, I didn't realize you could even make it any cheaper, right? And the big difference was, I think, the technology. Now, I don't know the inner workings of like these other companies' technologies, but from I was lucky enough to own some of them and then run your systems. And again, to me, it just comes down to a little bit of patience, right? You can have these systems where they say you're only going to need to go through one. It has this technology that it can check your metal density, but then it's like, okay, well, does that change from lot to lot? Does that change from a nil to a nil? Like, realistically, how does that really work? I don't know. but everybody's trusted and they've done the testing to say, hey, the measurements are coming out. But for years, I was like, man, maybe that's gonna be a problem. But after I used it, I was like, it's like for me, it's still one piece of brass. It just takes me a couple of extra nails to do it, right? And once I have the number, I have the number. And you and I have talked about this. Like, we need to have like a bracket for different types of brass, right? Like, hey, because you're not if you're like 6'5" Creedmoor brass, let's say Hornady, you're not gonna nail at 25 and below, and you're not gonna nail at 75 and above. You're somewhere in that middle 50%, right? Probably closer to the 50s in general. So that once I sort of figured that out in my head, because I conceptually understood like what does zero do, what does 100 do, what does 10 do, what does 80 do, right? I was like, oh, okay, it's right around this space. And then I thought, okay, so you don't really need all of these extra things that are in there to have an effective machine. And then I was able to start, I could then start to buy into what this system was, right? And yeah, obviously, as a consumer, I love seeing a new product. And as a person in the industry who got to beta test it, I couldn't help but be excited about it. But in the end, I needed it to work as good as the machine I had already bought, and it did. There was no difference at all. Once I got my number, I was like, this works exactly the same, and I don't have to buy anything else because it has the gravity feed right now. I have told you this. I'm hoping you will build a little contraption so I can hook my Dylan up to it. But other than that, right, I can gravity feed it. I can do whatever I need to do on it. And I can case prep and all of that stuff. And it works great. So I think for me, one of the things that's like very good to clear up for the consumer is that technology, that it isn't a necessity and it's what allows you to come in, I think, a little bit more competitive and it anneals just as well. And I've made an argument, and you can clarify this, that your system actually anneals better because it's a water cooled system, because it's a multi-fanned system, and because you use higher end components. It stays a little bit more consistent. It heats up a little bit faster. It cools a little bit faster. So in the reality of it, for your overall annealing system, it might actually be better if you're willing to deal with that initial upfront prep, right? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, and like I've always said before, whether it's flame or induction or whatever it is, everyone makes a great machine, right? I think there's a lot of great machine out there, and that's great for consumers. And you just and then I'll just come out and say, kind of before I go into any deeper, at the end of the day, we all have our different process, what we're comfortable with. Some people, there are still things that I do by hand because I prefer it that way. It just my mind just works that way. So at the end of the day, right, you pick what works best for you, what works, what you're most comfortable with, that what kind of flow that that you can that's acceptable to you. So with that said, obviously, we believe that what we put out, achieves what we set out to achieve: simplicity, speed, and number two is, I won't say that our components are better or worse or whatever it is. Not with the induction at least, right? Because I think the most of the manufacturers out there's a reason why they charge $2,000. There's software that are invested in it. There are technology that they put into it as well, and it works for for whoever that wants that kind of stuff. So that's great. That's not the space that we want to play in because there's no other options other than the advanced options, and that's the hole that we're trying to fill. So with that said, yeah, going back to your conversation earlier, right? Brass stretches, that even the same piece of brass at 3, 9, 12, everything changes. So so being on the same setting for those that want to achieve, like, hey, it has to be the same every single time. Well, I'm sorry, after three and Neo, your case is different, so it's not technically the same anymore, right? Your same setting isn't really, it's it's giving you a different result now.
Mhm.
But for me, we understand that it doesn't matter, because as long as every song is the same, doesn't have to be the same as last time, but as long as you're achieving those results, you got the job done, right? So yeah, so at the end of the day, yes, they are getting the job done, but to say that, hey, it was the same as, first time, the same as the last, the 12th time, no, it's not, right? And then number two is, here's another thing from a manufacturing standpoint, a lot of people don't, may not be aware of. Whether it's the speed controller, whether it's the motor, whether it's the power supply, well, every single component have some kind of variation, right? Let's just say, we use a 300 RPM motor. Um, and this one may run at 295. There's the other one may run at 315. There's always some kind of variation, and this power supply produce, you know, 3, 4, 5 watts of extra power, or this one less. And then every time you plug it in, this time I plug it in. Sometimes it's also your plug, the plug in your home, the electrical system, or your grid. Those also give you, electric fluctuation, right? And electric fluctuation in terms of induction means how much power is going to your heating. So with all those variables considered, not every machine is the same, and not every time you plug in your machine you're getting the same power. Power fluctuation, variations in in the component use. And then for us, it's the speed controller, the wheel, the motor, the power fluctuation, the heating board. So there's so many variables. So when we say, hey, like can we put out a list that says, oh, 80 is for this case, for 70 is for the for 308. Well, there's so many variables, not only with the machine, but you said like your first three anneal versus six anneal later. What if their lots are different? So that's why, right? Like, it's we can give them a guideline, but it's never going to be accurate,
Mhm.
right? The same thing, people that think like, hey, I have this setting, and I assume every single machine or every time like this setting is a one size fit all. No, that setting just, is set at a point that it will help you reach that point, right? Some of them may be, if some consider over anneal, but no, they're not over anneal, but they're just like, hey, we're gonna hit almost at the peak of that temperature, where we know no matter the thickness, composition, whatever, every case in this category will get a anneal in here, right, in this setting, even with the power fluctuation. So from a manufacturing standpoint, that's what we try to do. We say, hey, you know what? As long as we know there's that fluctuation and variation, but we just want to make sure that ours can accommodate all those things, right? And it won't make a difference to consumers, right? But it's false to believe that oh, it's the machine does that every single time. No, if you take instruments to measure it, you'll quickly find out that's not true, right? No matter, not just our machine, it's every single machine in the world.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what it's always interesting to talk to you and learn, some about how some of this stuff works and the reality of the industry that we're in and things like that. But what I can say is from my testing, from my experience, this brass that I've done, I've ran Peterson, I've ran Lapua, I've done Hornady, what's the other one? Star, something Star, I always forget the name of it. Um, yeah, I ran, thank you. I ran quite a bit of them through there, different firing amounts, different things like that. And yeah, it does, it always takes a little bit of time to lock stuff in. But once it does, my nailing process is good and I don't have any issues with firing and my groupings are staying tight. Right. So to me, I know that these processes are working well. I've always been very, happy with that. And it's been the same for me for flame annealing and for induction annealing. That's sort of been the big awakening for me in the last year is that they are. But I will say there's a sense of like security with induction milling, right? I don't want to really deal with flame, even though it feels cooler, like to do it with flame. Like I don't really want to deal with it, right? Things like that. But if I was getting into the industry and I wanted to get a taste of annealing, and I didn't want to make that initial investment, get a 2-in-1 induction nailer or get the new comp, right? The comp I mean I keep comp get that, right? I mean under $200, boom, you're in the game for a nailing, right? You still got to buy a case prep center, and that's important to understand as well. So you might as well go up if you don't have it, but get into it, start using them, start testing them out, and you're gonna have good results, and it extends the life. This is, a concept that has been proven. It is now part of the industry. We know that annealing and case prepping will extend the life of your brass. And if you aren't super hardcore into competing yet, it'll extend it even further, right? If you're one of these guys that are top 10% shooters, they stop shooting brass after competing on brass after four shootings anyway. Doesn't even matter. They just get new brass, right? But for those of you, right, maybe you're going to get up to 10, 12 firings out of these brass. So I think that that's a really cool thing. I appreciate what you're doing for the industry. I'm glad to be able to be a part of that and help, get these products out in the community where I think it really does make a huge impact for us to continue to grow. And it sort of leads me to the last part, which is sort of another, I don't know why you do it and I don't know how you do it, but it's sort of this last thing. Let's say you guys are interested in getting into a nailing, and you already have a nailer. You guys have, I think, the only trade-in program out of any reloading anything, right? Component, system, anything where you can trade in a product and get a discount on your product, right? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. I mean, whether it's experienced reloaders, I mean, mostly experienced reloaders, we tend to keep things on our bench, and and again, most of them last pretty long. So, and but there's the new fancy toys out there. Yes, you can go, sell your old one, whatever it is, but we always want the new one, And then now, and at that moment, I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna do it, right? And then I did some calculation. I was like, you know what, let like we're not making any money, but with the trade-ins, right? A lot of times we donate them to to people that need them, whatever. Yeah, sure, we want to give our give them our machines, and a lot of time people do trade in our old machines, Gen 1, whatever it is. But people also trade, they can trade in any machine. So we either donate them or we throw them up, as used units on, auction it off, on eBay or wherever it is. So, we do whatever as, as we see fit, depending on how many we have. And we don't usually have that many of them, at once until recently with the induction. Everybody want to trade in their unit for the induction. But yeah, that's kind of how it came to be, right? So we want to give them a good value, make it easy for them. They want to trade in the old one for a new one. That's a simple process. A lot of people don't want to go on forums or whatever to sell it, and do all that stuff, or they're like, I don't know how to do all that stuff. So we just want to make it simple. Hey, you have something, similar, you want to get a new one, give it to us, right? As long as it's in, working condition, is not beat up and all that stuff, we'll let you trade it in. And, you can get up to 50% off one of our new machines with the trade-in program. So it's a killer deal. So it benefits us, and it benefits the customer, right? So again, and as you know already from a lot of our conversations, at the end of the day, why we set out the goal, and a lot of things we talk about is, hey, what else can we do to get back to the community, right? That's always a lot of our conversation. Can we do some, sponsor some free reloading classes? Can we set up some shoots to encourage new shooters to, or encourage, shooters in general to take on reloading, right? I think everybody should reload, especially for us in California, where we have to pay ammo tax and that tax and this tax and a background check, right? Forget that. Start reloading. So that's what we're always looking to do, right? Like, how can we get back? How can we better serve the community? How can we make things affordable so everybody can enjoy, kind of the sport, the fun, right?
Mm,
And that's all it is, right? That's
yeah.
that's what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I was 50%, which is crazy. Obviously, taking in your own products was a big surprise. But then when I saw you guys take in other people's stuff as well, I was like, that's first off a very smart business choice there to take other people's stuff off the line and your guys' end up there. But again, it's helpful for the people that are, bought in a niller, just realized they have to buy a case prep center, and they're looking at the cost and like, oh, I could just trade this in and get this full system, right? So I think stuff like that is really cool and innovative to see on top of all the things you've done to sort of bring to the market. And I'm excited to see where everything goes for you guys. And if you guys are ever in the northern Sacramento area or the Sacramento and Northern California area, and we're doing our network events, you might be just lucky enough to run in to the very own owner over here, Burstfire. I appreciate you being on. Before we jump off, if people do want to take a look at your products, go ahead and provide your website and your social media accounts.
Yeah. Our website is burstfireguns.com or burstfire-reloading.com, right? Either one links to the same site, but you can also find, again, our product across, Amazon, Bass Pro, Midway, Precision Reloading, and many other local retailers as well. We have a, where to buy page on our website. Check it out. Find, find your favorite retailer or get the best deal that they can offer, and yeah, just buy it. And a lot of times, if they don't have them in stock, we tend to ship out to them very quickly, and they can probably, they'll get it in stock within a week or so.
Awesome. And your social media accounts?
Same thing. They're all under Burst Fire Guns for Instagram and Facebook. That's the only two. That's the only two we're on.
Perfect. If you guys got any reloading questions, particularly around case prep and annealing, drop a comment, give us a like, give us a share, let us know. We want to continue to grow this community. We definitely want to continue to grow the podcast, and continue to bring you guys insights on products, on processes within the industry. Thank you guys for being on, Desmond. Thank you for being on. And if you guys have a chance, get out to the range, take a shot, and I will see you next time.